Welcome to Home Education Matters, the weekly podcast supporting you on your home education journey. Hello and welcome to Home Education Matters, and today I'm joined again by Ash as we venture further into her journey into home education, and it's the end of month 4 for Ash and Ismail. So tell us a little bit about how your December has gone, Ash.
Oh, it's been a slow month, to be honest. I don't know if this is a theme. I don't know if this happens to other home educators as well. But I think this month has been really difficult to get Ismail motivated to do the standard kind of book learning that we've been doing up until now. So we've had to find opportunities kind of elsewhere for learning. And I say that, but I think I have to kind of almost trick him into, oh, we're not learning, but we are learning. That kind of ideology, which has been tricky, and it's been really difficult, I think, from a mental point of view, as in, am I doing enough, and that guessing and doubting myself. So it's been a difficult month from that aspect, I think.
It's been difficult for you because you've been doubting yourself, or has it been difficult for both of you, do you think?
Oh, I think he's loving life because he's got the freedom to be able to kind of I guess do the thing. So we've been doing lots of things. So he's very into Christmas presents this year, but not receiving them, giving them. So he's doing all the research about the different presents that he wants to get for everybody, and then kind of going out budgeting, finding the best prices for them, going out and buying them. And he doesn't think he's doing any learning here, by the way. This is him thinking that this is just life, and he's planning, whatever, this is what needs to be done. And that's probably a really good way of working for him at the moment, because there's a motivation of, although that thirst for kind of learning that we had initially has kind of tapered off a little bit. Now I had to have a conversation to say, because we're having a break, and I say break because we're still working through the break, but not like books and paper and all those sorts of things. But we said we're going to review our timetable and have a bit of a fresh start in January, because I think that's me kind of panicking though a little bit, because I feel as though we need to have something down on paper. And you'll know, because of my initial plans in September, I'm a bit of a planner and I like things to be kind of set, and we're going to go through these sorts of things. But my plans have gone out of whack a little bit, so certainly in December, and that's made me feel quite out of control. And so I think it's more difficult for me, of course, but equally for Ismail. I don't think it's difficult for Ismail, but I do worry that he is not getting the amount of learning, because I'm not trusting myself, I guess, enough to do the learning that we're doing naturally as being enough. So I think it's about retraining myself a little bit more, and again with the control, kind of letting go of that control. It's quite difficult to do.
So you're feeling that he's learning a lot outside of like the traditional sit down learning, but you want to make sure he's still doing sit down learning every day.
Yeah, that sounds weird, doesn't it? I'm saying it, but that is true, because he is doing lots of learning, and he's doing it off his own back as well. So like I said, he would tell me about, what was it? He was telling me something about Beirut and an explosion that happened in Beirut in 2004, or something along those lines that he'd researched. And he is learning about kind of history and things around the world off his own back. But I guess, because as from my teaching background as well, because I'm not always present when he's learning, which is probably how it should be anyway, I don't know how to categorize and label it and put it into like little boxes. So for me, that's the challenge of kind of understanding his learning, and then trying to move away from the traditional, well, this is history, then that's taken care of, and that's English, and that's taken care of. But obviously he's reading, he's researching, he's using his research skills, his budgeting, he's using his math skills, all those sorts of things. But for me, like I said, it's quite difficult to kind of tie away from or move away from the traditional classroom learning things. So yeah, I found that challenging.
It's funny when you were talking, because it made me think, and this is going to sound very arrogant, so I apologize in advance, but I was thinking the other day, because I'm nearly 50, I'm 50 next year, and I was thinking how much wiser I am than I was in my 20s. Like, just in so many ways, I know so much more, but not just know stuff, but know stuff on a deeper level. Like, I understand things and the world so much more. And when you were talking, I was thinking, how did I go from where I was in my 20s to where I am now? I never did like we obviously don't do any really formal learning. I've done some courses and stuff. I obviously did my master's, but generally that's not the stuff I've learned. The stuff I've learned has just been through life. And it's funny how when children are children, we have this thing, and I'm exactly the same, where I'm like, okay, which category is it? Is this like I would have a category which was life skills, which covered almost everything. It was like 90% of their learning was life skills. And then the rest was things like but if I couldn't put in like English and maths box and a history box, I would get kind of like, oh no, we haven't done enough history in inverted commas this week. When realistically, we'd been out to places, we'd talked about things. And I think when we're older and adults, we're so much more open to the idea of absorbing learning from the world around us. But with children, I think we struggle with that.
I think we do the majority of our learning after we turn 16 or 17 or 18, don't we? That's the truth. And I think because of the education system the way it is, there is so much emphasis on these GCSEs or SATs or whatever it is that we're working towards, that's not actually, and I'm more and more I'm coming around to the way of thinking of that's not actual learning, because that's learning for a test or learning for a specific reason. Of course it's learning. Of course you have to do, not you have to, but you need those qualifications if you want to go down a certain route. I think for me, the panic is, and I've talked about, I think I've mentioned this before, Ismail wants to try to go into year seven. And so if he wasn't, if I didn't have that kind of as a deadline, I think I'd be more relaxed about this. But I don't want him to have to go into year seven and then really struggle to kind of reacclimatize to the learning that they're doing, the pace of learning. So his, just like writing stamina and things like that, I feel as though are going to be, he's going to struggle with. And so breaks like this, I say break because the breaks from the book, but he's still learning in other ways, which I think is probably more valuable. It is more valuable learning because it's following his interests and it's the things that are going to really stick at the sticky knowledge that we talk about in schools. But I think for me, that's quite kind of worrying because I feel as though he's going to fall, that expression, fall behind. And I think that's that for me, that's the worrying part, that I need to make sure he's in a place where he's not feeling so overwhelmed, because then I'm not setting him up for success. However, I think I've mentioned to you before as well, and how I'm not sure that is the best option for him, because he has been thriving at home. His mental health is just so much better if he has as something that in the past he was having situations where he was becoming very overwhelmed and he becoming angry with those things and not really being able to understand his emotions and all those sorts of things. Whereas now, if he does hit a bump in the road, his resilience is so much better because he can talk himself out of it within kind of, not even half an hour, whereas we'd be stuck on something for days, in the past. So, there are so many benefits to where he's come to. But from an academic point of view, I just feel a little bit out of control with it. But yeah.
I mean, I've always been a big fan of sit-down lessons, because I'm quite a structured home educator. So I'm never going to sit here and say to you, oh yeah, who needs sit-down lessons? He's learning everything from the world around him. Lots of people would, and they'd probably be right. But that's not my ideology. And so I totally understand what you mean about sort of feeling like, well, they need to be doing something that involves practicing their handwriting, practicing their maths, that kind of maths muscle that I'm sure we have, because mine isn't there. So I'm guessing mine's very flabby, but very flabby maths muscle. And I think that have you tried, for example, saying to him, if you want to go back to school in September, we need to make sure that you're sort of acclimatized academically, so you need to be doing, say, like 1 hour every day where you sit down at the table and you're just doing some writing, doing some maths, for example? Have you brought him in?
That's the last conversation we've had. He's been mildly aware of that, but I'm very aware of that maybe sometimes I'm saying it because I'm in a panic, or I'm stressing about it, so I'm saying we need to make sure we're doing this. But just before we had an official break where I'm not, telling him to do it anymore. We talked about how, that's an issue, and he needs to make sure that he is, in the right place for September, if that's what he wants to do. And he was like, yeah, well, because the whole Christmas holidays were stretching in front of him at the time. They probably still are because we only just broke up. But he was like, yeah, we can do it. So I said we should do a new timetable, because I think my initial timetable was naive. I had too many things in there and we weren't getting through every single thing every day, which makes you feel like you failed a little, or makes me feel like I failed a little bit. So I think maybe tying it down. Now, you said something really interesting. You said an hour a day. So he is actually doing an hour a day of English and maths most days anyway. So he is actually sitting down and doing that. But to me, because my initial timetable was quite lengthy, I had like an hour, 45 minutes to an hour of English, maths, and then I had a couple of topics as well, and then like history and science or something within a day. I think because I've gone from that mentality to just doing that little hour of basic kind of maths and English in a day, and then he does his own learning. I think that's that's my mindset that needs to be. I need to adjust it for that. But yeah, like I said, we've had this conversation. We've decided to have like a new timetable from January, which is not as overloaded as the one we had before, and see how that goes and see where that goes.
I think that's a really good idea, because I think that kind of new year retrospective is really helpful, where you look back and you think, okay, we've done 4 months, what's worked, what's not worked, what do we like and we want to keep, and what do we want to change. I think that's really helpful. And one thing I would say when it comes to the timings is that I think we really overestimate how much time our child needs to spend sitting down learning when they come out of the school setting. Because in the school setting, we're so used to them spending quite a lot of time sitting down at desks, but it's a completely different thing at home because it's so much more intense. And realistically, they're not as distracted. I mean, you've worked in schools and I've worked in schools. When they're sitting at desks doing an hour of learning, that's not an hour of learning they're doing by any stretch. Like, it's maybe about 10 minutes. And it actually gets less and less as they go up the school system, which is ironic because you think it would get more and more, but it doesn't. So one thing I would say is that an hour every single day or most days of doing sit down learning, I think would prepare him pretty well for secondary school. And there is an argument, and I'll pop it up for all those people who are listening going like this. There is an argument that says that this process actually might be better off spent on improving his well-being and building up his resilience, if you like, for sort of overwhelming situations, and then reigniting his love for learning and all of that. And actually, maybe that might be a better preparation for school. I don't know.
Absolutely. That was my intention, though. So when I took him out of school and when we deregistered, my biggest intention, well, my biggest hope or aim was to build up his self-confidence again, just in himself and in his, just to reduce his anxiety and all those things, which has happened, which happened pretty instantaneously, to be honest. Like, it was quite a quick, like, I guess a breath of relief, like just to kind of like just a sigh, and just kind of the stress of the school system just melted away, which I think is, which is quite scary for me, thinking that we're going to be back there in September, because it will be difficult I think, for him to navigate that. So giving him those skills, those coping skills, I think is really important. It's going to be really imperative for him to be able to handle those situations. And I think, but yeah, there's got to be a bit of a balance with the academic things as well. But in year 7, so far as I understand and what I know from my experience, is that it's a bit of a consolidation year anyway, where you're kind of consolidating the learning you did in year 6. So, or lack thereof, well, not from a school point of view, from a smell, I should say, not the academic side of things. But so yeah, I guess I just need to basically work with him on getting the foundation there, which can be revisited in year 7, I suppose, and making sure that he is mentally able to kind of deal with those things.
I think you said a really valid thing towards the start of this podcast, which was when you said that I asked whether it was you who'd been struggling or you and Ismail who'd been struggling, and you said no, it was really just you, and that he was sort of pretty content with how things were going. And I think if you look at it and you see that he's doing sit down learning an hour most days, he's doing loads of outside classroom learning, if you like, loads of wider learning, and he's so much happier. There's a little part of my brain that says, I don't know, like, maybe he doesn't need to change anything about how he does it. Maybe it's you and how you sort of like, you consider. We always have this little person on our shoulder when we home educate, because we're just on our own. We don't really have sort of any guidance or markers of whether we're doing it right or doing it wrong, not until basically they get to GCSE age, and then we're like, oh, okay, we haven't done too badly then. But for years it's like a barren wasteland where you don't really know how you're doing. And I think so often we fill that gap with self-doubt. And I don't think that's anything to do with our children, or in fact our home education journey. I think it's just about us as parents, where we just fill these gaps with, oh, I'm not doing enough, and then it becomes we're not doing enough. But actually, it's not. That's the wrong pronoun, I think. I think it's generally about us and our doubts.
I think the hardest part of the journey for me so far has been that doubt, that self-doubt, that kind of, am I letting him down? Have I done enough? Is he doing enough? That is probably for me, because it's probably because, and it probably is because it's my first year doing it, I suppose, as opposed to kind of home education. I suppose once you get into a rhythm, you kind of you trust yourself a little bit more. But I think for me, the trust isn't quite there with myself, because I've done such a short amount of time that that is probably the most challenging thing for me as an individual. I think
Actually, and I hate to say this because I feel like it's not, like I don't want to like quash your dreams that it gets easier, but it never goes away. That self-doubt, those doubts, they never go away. But what happens is they become a kind of background hum that you get used to. So it's like they're always there. Like even now, I've been doing it a long time, and I regularly have those. I'm not doing enough. I'm failing them. I've failed them. If they were in a school, they might have done this, that, or the other. And I think you always have that. And I think it's just a case that you get used to it, and you're like, oh, okay, it's this again. It's this thought again. And you've had it for 10 years, and you're like, oh yeah, I recognize this pattern. And I think that's all that happens. I don't think it actually ever goes away. You just learn to live with that hum. I think it's like parenting, exactly the same as parenting, isn't it? That low level worry that starts when they're born and stays with you. I think that's there for life.
Yeah, well, thanks for that.
I feel really bad.
Optimism thinking, the more I do it, the better it'll get. But I can understand that. I can, when you're relating it to parenting, I think you're right, because that worry never goes away, does it? Once you're a parent, you're a parent, and you're not really always prepared for the worry that comes alongside it. But I think because it essentially is you parenting, but then taking the responsibility of schooling on as well. So it's not just parenting anymore. You've got nowhere to send your children to for 6 hours of the day, where you don't have to worry about that. You're doing it yourself, but the benefits that come with that, and it's really important for me to remind myself and remind us all of the benefits of just him as a person and his personality, which has been able to just flourish in the time that he has been at home and not had to worry about the stress of going to school. And those things, he's taken up badminton as well. So that's another thing he's doing. Like he wouldn't be doing that if he was at school. So we all go, we go once or twice a week, and it's something that he's improved on. So it's been such a steep learning curve for him, from not even being able to play to now actually have a rally and things like that. So he is growing in other areas as well that we wouldn't normally consider them home education, but home educating, but they are part of his learning, aren't they? Because he's growing as a person.
Absolutely. I mean, I think home education is one of those scenarios where, when you see those videos and they're throwing babies into swimming pools, and then they just like bob up and swim to the surface and swim around. And then you try to throw an adult into a swimming pool and they basically drown if they didn't know how to swim. And I think it's a bit like that with home education. Children invariably take to it really well. And I think it's us adults that sometimes find that transition much harder.
I think it's what we've been conditioned to believe as well, isn't it? Because we've been through the school. And most adults, I'm sure there are some who have been home educated themselves, but the majority have been in the traditional school system themselves. And then they kind of ingrained to believe something a certain way. And then it's quite difficult for me personally. It's quite difficult for me to then move away from those traditions of schooling. But I want to, I really want to, and that's why I'm taking steps to move away from them. But it is harder to do. It's easier to say than to do, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true. And I think you're doing very well, because I think, you're still very new to it. And I think the two of you actually are adapting really well. So I wouldn't worry too much. It's just that natural process where these little voices in your head start piping up and making you feel inferior. So I wanted to ask about socializing, but I'm aware that December is really not the month for that, because home educators just go into hibernation for 2 weeks of December.
That's a new thing. I didn't even know about that. But they absolutely, everyone has hibernated, I'd say. But he has had lots of opportunities, with it being Christmas, to mix with old school friends and kind of people that he would normally see around Christmas anyway, people that he doesn't see regularly, kind of children his age. But we always get together kind of a couple of times a year. So he's had a lot of kind of opportunities to do things with people that he wouldn't normally, but we have not gotten to the stage where we've made those friends, which I think are so important for him. Because one of the biggest reasons he wants to go to school, I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, is because he wants to feel normal. He wants to feel like he's got a social circle. He's got those things which he hasn't got at the moment when he's home educating. Of course, he socializes with people that he's familiar with, but he's not got that circle of friends that he would that he would ideally have if he was in school. So that's something that we need to continue to work on. But I'm hoping, like, do people come out of hibernation in January? Does that happen? Or
Yeah. Yeah, and the Facebook groups get very busy with people who have had a Christmas very much like you, and they get to New Year and they think, I really need to like find some friends for my child.
yeah,
So they tend to go on the Facebook groups and sort of start clubs and that kind of thing. And honestly, your local Facebook groups are your friends when it comes to anything like this. Just like get out there and really, you know, we were talking about it in the last episode. You have to kind of throw yourself out there much more than you would if it was just you trying to make friends. You have to like really kind of like pursue people and be like, yes, let's meet up. Oh, I know it's not worked 3 times in a row, but let's have another go.
absolutely. Yeah, no, that's how that. So we've got some resolutions for the new year that I think we'll be following. I think we've got to, relook at the timetable, look at socialization again, and just kind of try and throw him into it again a little bit more, get that motivation going. To be fair, I think he's fairly motivated anyway, because he's quite enjoying the whole aspect of home educating, and I am too. I really enjoy spending like lots of time with him, and I don't feel guilty for like not having that. When you get the children at school and then they've got clubs and things after school, and then you don't really get that time to connect, other than, or maybe if you have dinner together, and then you really can't get to the surface of really what's going on with them. I kind of feel like I don't have that aspect of anyway. I feel like I know him really well at the moment, and what he's going through and all those sorts of things. Yeah, actually, yeah. So I think we just need to have a few things that we set that we're going to aim to do. Not too many things, because I think that's what mistake we've made in the past, is it's become too overwhelming. Maybe just have a couple of goals that we have that we want to meet, and hopefully that will make him happier anyway, make him more well. Because I think he would want that. I think he would want. Well, he does want that. He does want to have more children his age to kind of play with or to engage with. So I think that's going to be a positive for him, not negative. So that's the aim.
Yeah, that sounds a good plan for January, I think, because this sense of wanting to go back to school to feel normal is rooted in the fact that he's not hanging out with people who are home educated. So for him, it feels very weird. Whereas if he hangs out with people who are home educated, that will start to feel more normal. The first time my children hung out with schooled children, it felt very weird for them because they'd not really ever done it. They'd only really ever hung out with home educated children. So it's what your normal is, what you surround yourself with. So the more you can surround yourself with the new normal, then the more chance there is that come September you won't have to put him back into school, and then you won't need to worry about this pressure to keep him up to date with the school system.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Well, thank you so much for taking time during your Christmas to come and speak to us on the podcast. We look forward to hearing from you in January and hearing what you've been up to in January, and have a very lovely new year.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Ash. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's Home Education Matters podcast. See you at the next one. Have a lovely day.